What the fuck? I was taken aback by what was happening to Joe. But just as I was starting to back away, Joe would speak. What? What's wrong? I was almost speechless. Your eyes, the smell, it's just... Everything was coming out at intervals rather than all together. Joe would just shake his head with a smirk. I think you're seeing shit, TJ. What are you talking about? I was dumbfounded. I began to sniff deeper and deeper. You don't smell that? I said as I covered my mouth and nose with my sleeve. It smells rancid, dude. It's the same scent I smelled when I saw, the creature. Joe shook his head as if he had no idea what I was talking about. I think you need some sleep, man. You're losing your mind. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had just envisioned everything I saw moments before. Maybe it was all just my mind playing tricks on me. With a sigh, I reluctantly agreed. As I got up to leave with Joe, he would wrap his arm around my neck. Look, I don't know what was on those videotapes, but we need to just stop. This isn't healthy and it's driving you crazy. You're seeing shit and you're smelling rotten eggs. That isn't right. I sighed. You're right. At that moment, my eyes widened. I told Joe I smelled something, but I didn't tell him what I smelled. Joe, I asked, quivering my bottom lip. Yeah, what's up? I gulped. I never told you what the smell was. How did you know it was rotten eggs? Joe was quiet. I stared at him as he flashed a smile. I jumped backwards as Joe flung himself onto me. I resisted as much as I could, but I knew there was nothing I could do. Joe, now looking more like the creature, stuck its tongue out and began to drag it across my cheek. I was frozen in fear. I couldn't move any part of my body, no matter how hard I tried. I laid there, completely motionless as the creature dragged its serpent-like tongue across my cheek. Its breath was unbearable, but no matter how much I squirmed or screamed for help, it would not loosen its grip on me. The creature extended its finger and dragged it across my cheek, drawing blood in the process. I stared into its eyes and felt like I was staring face to face with Satan himself. Accepting my fate, I closed my eyes and expected the worst. That's all I remember. I woke up sometime later in the familiar surroundings of a hospital. The white walls and the taste of anesthetic made me feel safe, as well as sick to my stomach. I was greeted by my fiancé and a group of doctors. Oh, thank God, my fiancé screamed as she began to cry. Are you okay? There was a tube down my throat which was preventing me from answering, but I nodded my head. Soon enough, the doctors came in to remove my feeding tube from my throat. I can't describe the feeling, but it's nothing I want to experience again. I was in a coma for a solid week. A neighbor of my parents found me in the basement at the bottom, not completely unconscious. Apparently, the front door was open and the neighbor grew worried. I'm alive thanks to him. Nothing made sense to me. Where's Joe? I questioned. My fiancée had a look of confusion on her face. Honey, don't you remember? She said, wiping a tear from her eye. I shook my head. TJ, Joe died in that accident with your parents. My entire world flashed before my eyes. How was that possible? I had just seen Joe moments before I blacked out, right? Or was everything just my subconscious running wild while I was knocked unconscious? What about the videotapes? I questioned. What videotapes, babe? The videotapes of my parents' house. Where are they? They were in a brown box on the coffee table. My fiancée shook her head as if she had no idea what I was talking about. Everything took place in my head. From Joe, to the videotapes, to the creature. Everything was a part of my subconscious. I felt sick to my stomach, perhaps just from the anesthetic. My fiancée ran her fingers through my hair to calm me down, but nothing seemed real. Hell, was this even real? After a few days in the hospital to recover, I was allowed to go home. My fiance told me everything. I received a call away at college that my parents and brother died in a car accident. Joe was driving them somewhere when the car slid off an embankment and crashed. I didn't have the heart or the stomach to tell my wife what happened, but I had to. I told her about Joe. I told her about the basement, the creature, the videotapes, everything. She smiled and ran her fingers through my hair again. It was her way of calming me down, and it always worked. It sounds like you have a wild imagination. I guess the brain works in mysterious ways. In a sense, despite losing my brother and my parents, things seemed normal for once. The entire ordeal, even though it was played out in my subconscious, was over. I was a bit confused as to why I was in the house to begin with, but everything started to come back to me. After the funeral, I went back to the house to get the belongings. I must have blacked out shortly after and imagined the entire thing, including Joe in my subconscious. But I don't remember blacking out, but I remember Joe vividly. I remember him smoking one of my dad's cigars. I remember him freaking out about the videotapes and whatnot. Everything just seemed so real, and the fact that it wasn't just left me completely dumbfounded. I went back to the home a few days later just to ensure my subconscious was right. The basement was just as I remembered it, but no matter how much time I spent there, I never found the videotapes. They were gone, or perhaps they were never there to begin with. As I sat in the basement, I sighed with relief and walked back up to the living room, shut the door behind me and locked the door and never looked back. Eventually the home became property of the bank and a family of 4 moved in shortly after. That part of my life was behind me. I graduated and my fiance and I moved into a nice 2-bedroom home in the city. She became pregnant with our first child, expecting here in a few months. It's gonna be a boy. We're naming him Elijah, after my grandfather. We're hoping to have another child sometime after Elijah is born, and hopefully it'll be a girl. We just want to start a family and live happily ever after, as corny as that sounds. The wedding is planned after the birth of Elijah. Her parents weren't too happy we conceived before we were married, but they'll get over it. It's not like they have a choice. And as for the blackouts, I haven't had them since the last incident in the basement. Sure, I still think about what happened, but I have to remind myself it was all my subconscious. None of it actually happened. It may have seemed real, but not everything is what it seems. Things have been good for the most part, but lately my wife has been acting weird. She keeps saying I've changed and I've grown a bit irritable. I've done nothing that I can think of. Perhaps it's just pregnancy hormones or something like that. She caught me sleepwalking a few times a night and said I looked as if I were in a trance. The house we just bought, which we thought was our dream house, turned out not to be the perfect paradise that we had hoped. We're thinking of moving. My wife keeps smelling a foul odor in the home and she feels like it's going to be bad for the baby. She keeps trying to tell me to get it fixed, but I have no idea what she's talking about. I don't smell anything.